Our whole universe was in a hot, dense state, then nearly 14 billion years ago, The Big Bang Theory premiered on CBS. Wait, that's not right. But it seems like that long ago, right? The hit sitcom ran for 12 seasons and brought the term bazinga into everyday use. But as much as we all loved the show, it wasn't without its faults. There were plenty of plot holes and just incorrect science theories that we all just went with because we love Sheldon. What were the biggest? Let's get into those right now. What do you think the audition process was like for Lance Barber, the man who plays George Sr. in Young Sheldon? Do you think he just hid the fact that he already played Leonard's high school bully in season 5 of The Big Bang Theory? I think I would. I'd probably just hope no one notices. But here's the thing about the internet. We all notice everything. The fact that Leonard's bully and Sheldon's father are played by the same actor has been a weird plot hole that's never fully been addressed. The least Sheldon could have done is say the two looked alike. Speaking of George Sr., ever since Young Sheldon premiered, there's been one massive plot hole that has left fans scratching their heads, and that's been the portrayal of George Sr. So far, George Sr. has appeared to be a kind-hearted, supportive father to his kids, which goes against the drunkard, philandering, and mean characterization that Sheldon gave to his father in The Big Bang Theory. Recent episodes of Young Sheldon have started to set up the darker turn for George Sr., so this will probably correct itself soon, but still, for the longest time, this was seriously jarring. The final season of the show focused on Sheldon and Amy's quest to win a Nobel Prize. And while the journey was filled with twists, turns, and laughs, it was not an accurate representation of how the actual process for winning a Nobel Prize actually goes. According to reports from actual experts, the fact that Sheldon and Amy's very new published paper, with the findings measured only one time, would have been absolutely impossible to win the Nobel Prize. It's understandable why they did things this way, but for all those who think winning a Nobel Prize is as easy as it is on TV, well, sorry to disappoint you. In case you didn't notice, the 4 male leads of The Big Bang Theory are a little bit nerdy. Okay, maybe more than a little. Maybe they're astronomically nerdy. Or in Howard's case, astronautically nerdy. Man, who doesn't love a good space pun? Anyways, Howard's character in later seasons was defined by his astronaut arc.
Hey, Fruit Loops, did you clean the space toilet?
And seeing him become a real astronaut was a major highlight for the show. But in reality, this would never fly in real life. Howard has so many things wrong with him, including the risk of heart disease, arrhythmia, and a major nut allergy coupled with seasickness. And maybe these things wouldn't outright disqualify him, but NASA would have still probably picked a safer choice with less health problems. Sheldon and Amy's Nobel Prize winning theory of superasymmetry sounds complex whenever we hear the show talk about it. But is it too complex for even Sheldon and Amy? We know that it revolved around subatomic particles and what those particles do in certain situations. But a plot hole is how it definitely needed more people working on it than just the 2 main characters. For example, while superasymmetry might not be a real theory, supersymmetry is, and right now there's a team of 3,000 scientists working on it from around the world. So you're telling me 2 scientists in California cracked superasymmetry by themselves? Unlikely. Sheldon is one smart cookie, and if you ask him about it, he's probably the smartest cookie in any cookie jar. The whole show relies on the fact that Sheldon is insanely smart in all sorts of academia, but lacks fundamental social skills. And most of the time, Sheldon does get to show off that big brain of his, which makes it all the more noticeable when he's flat out wrong without anyone correcting him.
I made a boo-boo, and I gave it to Stephen Hawking.
A lot of them are minor instances, things like him misspelling a word like fusion on his whiteboard or incorrectly stating that hitting a fork on a wine glass makes a B-flat note when it's really just a B. Hey, if Sheldon was anyone else, we wouldn't notice, but heavy lies the head that wears the crown, right? If the show says he's smart, he's gotta be smart. Did you catch this tiny plot hole? If you did, you deserve probably your own PhD because it's incredibly minor. In the first season, it's stated that Sheldon is a Taurus, but we know that's incorrect, since we know he was born on February 26, 1980. But that date doesn't make him a Taurus, it makes him a Pisces. Then, later on in the show, he's correctly called a Pisces, but at that point, the damage was done. The plot hole had already been created. But yeah, I guess it doesn't matter because I see Sheldon as more of a Pisces anyway, don't you? If there's one rule of the universe, it's that most pregnancies last 9 months. Unless, of course, you live in the bizarro Big Bang Theory world where pregnancies last almost a year. Bernadette discovered she was pregnant with her daughter on Valentine's Day, which implies she was about a month along at that point. But then, Bernadette doesn't end up giving birth until December, which means the character was pregnant for an extra long time. Hey, maybe that's just a special trait of the Wallowitz children.
Do it! Have a baby! Do it!
Early on in the show's run, it's noted how Sheldon is extremely allergic to cats and can't be around them. But the show completely ignores that tidbit later on in the show's 4th season, when we see Sheldon go a little cat crazy. After a bit of a breakdown, Sheldon brings home a whopping 6 cats, much to everyone's surprise. On top of how weird this is, no one mentions his previous allergies. Maybe they're all just too distracted by all that cuteness running around the apartment. I know I would be.
So sassy.
Speaking of allergies, out of everyone on the show with allergies or dietary restrictions, it seems like Leonard has it the hardest. It sometimes feels like Leonard is allergic to absolutely everything and has the most overall problems within the group. It's a wonder how he can get out of bed every day. But the issue with that is the show is inconsistent with Leonard's food allergies. For instance, one time he refused wine because of the sulfates within it. But throughout the show, we see Leonard drink wine with no issues whatsoever. Maybe he's just sucking it up, or doesn't care, or maybe this is just a minor plot hole the writers don't necessarily care too much about. A unique aspect of Howard's character was his semi-creepy relationship with his overbearing mother. We may have never seen Mrs. Wallowitz on the show in person, but we certainly heard her. The character certainly knew how to make an impression, but the running joke with the character was that she was so morbidly obese that she could barely walk or fit through things. Though things don't necessarily add up here. We've caught quick glimpses of her walking around in the background where yes, she's large but not morbidly obese, and the quick pictures we've seen of her and even the shots of her arms suggest she's not as big as the show originally made her out to be. Writing a character like Sheldon must be difficult. I can't imagine what the writers have to do to remember all of Sheldon's little quirks and characteristics that define who he is. But when it comes to sarcasm, something just doesn't add up. Early on in the show, Sheldon makes a point to claim how he doesn't understand sarcasm at all. And whenever someone uses it with him, it's usually played as a joke of Sheldon taking it literally. But then on the flip side, Sheldon uses sarcasm himself almost all the time, and it just seems weird to have a character say he doesn't understand sarcasm when used against him, but then turn around and use it perfectly, right?
Our babies will be smart and beautiful.
Not to mention imaginary.
If there's 2 things we know about Sheldon Cooper, it's that he loves to say bazinga, and he is absolutely adamant about his special spot. There's been whole monologues on why Sheldon loves that very specific spot in the apartment, and he never lets anyone sit there. There have been instances in the show where other people seem to sit in the special spot without Sheldon saying a word about it, which goes against his character. It's just a little inconsistent how sometimes he's angry about it and other times he just lets it happen. In season 8 of the show, one memorable episode was the one where Leonard needed to have a surgery to fix his deviated septum since his snoring had gotten out of control. The emotional heart of that episode was Sheldon being a little nervous for his friend to have surgery, and while that's sweet and all, the whole experience created another plot hole. Both in season 3 and in season 6, characters mention that Leonard specifically doesn't snore. But hey, I guess this plot hole is alright since it gave us a sweet Sheldon and Leonard focus episode, right? This is one that only diehard fans of The Big Bang Theory would notice. You probably have to be as smart as Sheldon to put this together. We all know Sheldon follows a very strict schedule. Part of this is watching Doctor Who every Saturday morning without fail. But in the episode The Dumpling Paradox, Penny disrupts that by sleeping on their couch. But it was established that the night before Penny slept over, the gang was playing Halo, which only takes place on Wednesday nights. Meaning either there was a continuity error or somehow the show bent space and time to skip Friday. Probably that first one. Leonard had a lot of romantic encounters over the show, but one of the funniest had to be Joyce Kim, mainly because she turned out to be a spy from North Korea. But the timeline here doesn't make much sense. In one of the early episodes, it stated that Joyce and Leonard were together for 27 days. But then in the episode The Staircase Implementation, Leonard says he only knew Joyce Kim for 12 hours. Seems like a strange continuity error that could have easily been avoided, don't you think? Barry Kripke was always a bit of a thorn in our character's sides, but one of his most infamous pranks came in season 3. While Sheldon was doing a radio interview, Kripke filled the room with helium, which distorted Sheldon's voice to hilarious results.
If you cut that in half, you have 2 smaller magnets.
And while this was fun, people were quick to point out that this prank should have been deadly. That amount of helium is actually dangerous and should have caused Sheldon to suffer from oxygen deprivation. Yeah, can you imagine what Kripke would have done if he had accidentally killed Sheldon Cooper right there? For most of the Big Bang Theory, whenever a nerdy guest star makes an appearance, they usually play some version of themselves, like Mark Hamill, James Earl Jones, Will Wheaton, etc. But it was a treat to see Eliza Dushku show up as an FBI agent. But it's a little strange because Buffy the Vampire Slayer exists in this universe and the characters reference it a lot, and yet no one calls out the striking similarity between both Eliza Dushku's characters. I know, this one maybe I shouldn't be too hard on, but again, was it too hard to throw in a, hey, you look like Faith from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, that's pretty cool? I guess not. It's understandable how Young Sheldon and The Big Bang Theory are different shows, and it's hard to maintain a consistent continuity. But there's one element of The Big Bang Theory finale that many fans found odd. When Sheldon is giving his thank you speech for his Nobel Prize, he mentioned all of his friends, but there was no mention of Dr. Sturgis. We've recently found out in Young Sheldon that Dr. Sturgis was the one who got Sheldon into physics in the first place and was his first major mentor. Which makes it weird how Sheldon wouldn't mention him after winning a Nobel Prize for physics. Young Sheldon, though, might explain it by having the two have a falling out of some sort, and it certainly seems like we're on that track now with the current batch of Young Sheldon episodes, doesn't it? The mystery behind the broken elevator was one of the biggest questions surrounding The Big Bang Theory before it was revealed that the gang broke it after one of Leonard's experiments went horribly wrong. But eagle-eyed viewers soon recognized the plot hole behind this. When the story is finally revealed, we found out the elevator broke 4 years before the series began. But this is different than what was said before, when Leonard mentioned it was broken 2 years before the series began. Is this a simple mistake, or did the elevator secretly break twice and there's a whole other story we need to see? Probably not, but that's in my headcanon now. A lot of these plot holes can be chalked up to either poor continuity or the show wanting to tell a joke, but this specific plot hole is just strange. Early on in the show, Penny mentions that her father's name is Bob. But then, later on in the series, when her father actually shows up, his name is Wyatt. That's a little odd. There was no reason for them to change the name, and it didn't serve the story at all. Were they worried the name Bob wasn't exciting enough? Did they just forget and didn't bother to check? It's mistakes like these that make you wonder how the writers can come up with such amazing scientific theories and jokes, but forget a simple name. One of the best running gags in the show is the existence of the roommate agreement, which is the contract between Leonard and Sheldon that details all the rules that Leonard has to follow to live with Sheldon. It's a bunch of little things like what temperature to keep the thermometer at, or how Leonard isn't allowed to whistle. Sheldon is usually a huge stickler for these rules, unless he isn't. A lot of times when the story demands it, like when Leonard has an unexpected house guest over, even though he's supposed to give Sheldon a 12-hour notice, Sheldon won't say anything. Most shows like to keep the area where the protagonists live as relatively vague, but not Big Bang Theory. The show has told us that the apartment address is 2311 North Los Robles Avenue, Pasadena, California. And along with the address, the show has mentioned how there's a gas station literally right across the street. Anyone with Google Maps could easily debunk this theory, as it shows there isn't a nearby gas station in the area, and if that wasn't enough, the idea of the gas station was fully debunked when Howard and Bernadette got married and there's a long aerial shot of the area. The idea of Sheldon Cooper and dancing goes together like Mrs. Wolowitz and talking at normal levels, meaning that, yeah, they don't go together at all. Sheldon said early on in the show's run how much he doesn't know how to dance, as well as having no desire to learn. But then, later in the show, he discussed how he was forced to take cotillion training as a young kid, as well as his epic attempts to dance to woo Amy. So by the end of the show, there was a lot of dance background in Sheldon's life, even if the show didn't admit it at first.
That was a close one.
This is another one of those instances where the show's timeline became so convoluted that it became hard to keep the characters' pasts make chronological sense. In Season 5, Leonard explains how he went to Comic-Con in summer of '09. But timeline-wise, that doesn't make sense because summer of '09 was the summer Leonard spent in the Arctic with his buddies. Now, I wouldn't put it past them though to take a break from the Arctic and fly to Comic-Con, enjoy all the amazing stuff Comic-Con has to offer, and then fly back to the Arctic to complete their mission. I mean, actually that sounds pretty plausible, but the show never referenced that. Obviously, the biggest mistake about Big Bang Theory is that it's not on anymore. Yes, these were all problems, but I'm sure all of us are generally okay with a lot of these since we love the show so much. Now, is it too much to ask for a revival series? Come on, just pay Jim Parsons more money, I'm sure he'd do it.